Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roach Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. We just passed 780 subs. Thank you guys so much for all the support, and I hope I can continue to make great content you guys will enjoy in the future. Now, the Kansas Jayhawks, a blue blood program with a Hall of Fame coach in Bill Self, just landed another intriguing transfer portal addition. Arterio Morris, a former 5-star guard for the Texas Longhorns, has decided to transfer to the Kansas Jayhawks. I'm going to go over whether I think that Arterio Morris can play a key role on Kansas' basketball team next year, and whether I think Arterio Morris can live up to his 5-star potential. Now, Arterio Morris, he was the 16th ranked player in the 247 Sports 2022 recruiting class. He was a 5-star recruit, and he's a really talented player. He's a 6'3", 190-pound guard, and a lot of people thought he would be a one and done, but he decided to commit to the Texas Longhorns. That is his home state, and he did not have a lot of success with the Texas Longhorns this past season, but a lot of it was not his fault. He did not play that much this past season. He only played 12 minutes a game, and that was due to the fact that Texas had a deep guard rotation. They had a lot of guys that were ahead of him on the depth chart, and I don't think that necessarily is an indication that Arterio Morris is not a good player. He still could be special, and he still could be a great player overall that could have an NBA future, but he definitely went to a team that did not need a lot more guard help, and Arterio Morris kind of got lost in the shuffle. But he averaged 4.6 points per game, 1.4 rebounds, and 0.5 assists in those 12 minutes per game. And if you project that out to 40 minutes, Arterio Morris will be averaging way in the double digits, so he definitely has the potential to score the basketball, and he did show what he could do in limited minutes with Texas. He shot 41.1% from the field, 33.3% from the three-point line, and 78.6% from the free throw line, so the free throw number is pretty solid. He does need to improve on the three-point shooting percentage, but that might improve with more rhythm being in the game longer at Kansas if he does play more for the Jayhawks per game next season, and being around better basketball players that will be able to pass the ball to him, that he might be able to improve at that three-point shooting percentage, and 41% from the field needs to improve a little bit on that as well, but I do think Arterio Morris can improve. But the question will be for Kansas, will he improve, and will Arterio Morris have a big role for Kansas next season? The potential is definitely there because of the fact you look at the players that Kansas is bringing in. They have Elmarko Jackson as a 5-star recruit in the high school class, Chris Johnson, Marcus Adams Jr., and Jamari McDowell. All of those are really talented basketball players that can come in. A couple of them are at the guard position, specifically Elmarko Jackson, but you also have to realize that those players are freshmen and coming into a situation just like Arterio Morris was of their first season of college basketball. Sometimes it's an adjustment period, so Arterio Morris will have the leg up on those guys because he is going into his second season of college basketball, so he'll have more experience and more likely will be ahead of those guys in the depth chart, especially if he can prove to Bill Self and the rest of the team that he is definitely a guy that should be getting a lot of minutes next year. Kevin McCullough, he is a guy that's testing the NBA draft waters. He could return, and that would be huge for Kansas in their quest to potentially win the Big 12 next season and have a lot more success in college basketball, maybe make a deeper run in the NCAA tournament than they did this past year. Kevin McCullough is a big piece, but he is a small forward, so he definitely will not impact Arterio Morris's playing time at all. KJ Adams, he's returning. MJ Rice, he's a 5-star recruit that decided to transfer out of Kansas to the NC State Wolfpack, and he was a 5-star recruit, so maybe Arterio Morris can slide into MJ Rice's role that he could have had this season if he had not decided to transfer. DeJuan Harris, he is back. He is a fantastic point guard, which I think will definitely be able to set up Arterio Morris at a high level next year. Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick are both gone, and that is really tough. Both were fantastic players, but you have to be able to replace talent, and Kansas is doing that right here, getting these transfer portal players in, like Arterio Morris, but more importantly, Nick Timberlake. He's the splash transfer that Kansas has already brought in, so that puts less pressure on Arterio Morris to have success right out of the gate. Because Nick Timberlake is a 6'4", 200-pound guard from Towson, who's transferring to Kansas as well, and he averaged 17.7 points per game, 3.9 rebounds, and 2.4 assists this past season for Towson. He shot the ball really well from the three-point line at 41.6%. He shot 85% at the free throw line, so he's definitely the headline transfer that Kansas has brought in, unless they're somehow able to land Hunter Dickinson, who definitely would be the biggest transfer portal addition that Kansas would bring in if they were able to land him, or maybe some other player that could still enter the portal that Kansas could get. But still, right now, Nick Timberlake, he is the biggest transfer portal addition. He should be able to immediately slide into that starting 2-guard role and have a lot of success for Kansas next year, even though he will have to make the jump from a smaller school in Towson in a smaller conference over to Kansas, which is in the Power 6. Sometimes that is a tough adjustment period to make, but I do think Nick Timberlake should be able to easily make the transition for the most part. Maybe his scoring will dip a bit from around 17 points per game to probably 11 to 13 points per game, but he still should have a lot of success for Kansas next season because he's an experienced player and he definitely wants to have success at a winning basketball team. But I think Arterio Morris has that potential to slide into the starting lineup. You could have potentially a 3-guard lineup of DeJuan Harris, Arterio Morris, and Nick Timberlake if Bill Self wants to run small and have more experienced guys on the floor. And Arterio Morris will be a sophomore, as some of the guys coming in for Kansas will be freshmen, and maybe they will not be as experienced to be ready for college basketball. But Arterio Morris is going to have to prove himself, and it's a really interesting decision to transfer to Kansas because Texas is losing Marcus Carr, Timmy Allen, and a lot of the other players that were ahead of him on the depth chart. And I feel like Arterio Morris could have had success at Texas if he did return for the Longhorns for this next season, but he decided to transfer to Kansas. I don't think all is lost. I don't think it's a bad decision all around for Arterio Morris because I think at either school he could have a lot of success. At Texas he would have had more playing time, but maybe he wouldn't have gelled as well with Rodney Terry. Maybe he would have gelled better with Chris Beard, who he did commit to at Texas. Maybe that's why he did decide to enter the transfer portal. Texas has had a lot of players leave because I think maybe the move to Rodney Terry, maybe they just want to find a fresh start. It's not that Rodney Terry isn't a great coach. He brought in Max Amos, but that is the nature of the transfer portal. Players want to be where they feel the most comfortable in, and I feel like Arterio Morris wanted a new change of scenery, and Kansas could be the place where he can have a lot of success because usually Kansas is loaded at the guard position, but that's why Bill Self has had to bring in Nick Timberlake and Arterio Morris through the portal. The transfer portal can be a quick fix for a lot of college basketball teams when they're losing so much talent and also players to graduation and the transfer portal themselves. And I think you look at Kansas. If MJ Rice had stayed for the Jayhawks this next season, he could have been a guy that had a much bigger role this year, but Arterio Morris, he's transferring in from Texas to Kansas. He could slide into that bigger role MJ Rice could have had. He could have a lot of success next year. Arterio Morris will definitely have to get used to playing on a team where he could potentially have more playing time. Instead of being in a backup role, he'll have to adjust to being a guy that's featured more often in the offense, especially if he's going to be a starter. But I think he has so much potential. He was a 5-star recruit for a reason. He's a really talented guard that still has a great potential to be able to make the NBA in the future. And I think if Arterio Morris improves at shooting threes and gets that shooting percentage up to 37%, and he can start averaging around 8 to 10 points per game if he does start for Kansas next season, next to DeJuan Harris and Nick Timberlake, where he will probably be the third primary option at guard. He won't have to be the guy that has to do everything for the Kansas Jayhawks next year because he's going to have really talented guards around him, and DeJuan Harris will be able to set him up with great passes, be able to get really good looks. And I think Kansas all around, they get Kevin McCullough back and also having KJ Adams, I think Kansas could be potentially Hunter Dickinson away or a really good transfer portal player away from the Jayhawks being able to compete for a Big 12 title and potentially being a better basketball team than they were last year. They were great last season with Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick, but they could have more balance this season, especially if players like Arterio Morris step up and play at a much higher level than he did at Texas. But I do think that Bill Self, he's doing a great job in the transfer portal, bringing in Nick Timberlake and now bringing in Arterio Morris. Arterio Morris is a really talented player. It's a big loss for Texas because they really could have used him for this next season, but the Kansas Jayhawks, they are gaining a really talented player with a lot of upside, but a lot of untapped potential. It's going to have to show out for Arterio Morris, or he will struggle with the Jayhawks next year, and he could get lost in the shuffle with Elmarco Jackson, some of the freshmen Kansas is bringing in, maybe some other transfer portal players that Bill Self can bring in. If he can bring in some more transfer portal players, Kansas could be elite next season. But as is, I like Kansas' roster. I think they might have to make one or two more moves to be a fantastic team next year, but right now Kansas looking really great for next season in college basketball, potentially one of the best teams in the Big 12, maybe even the best team in the Big 12, and could really make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. And Arterio Morris, if he does improve from his 4.6 points per game they had at Texas to maybe around 10 points per game, he will be a great transfer portal addition for the Kansas Jayhawks. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about Arterio Morris transferring from Texas to Kansas, and whether you think he could have a lot of success for the Jayhawks next year, and how good of a job you think Bill Self is doing in the transfer portal this offseason for the Kansas Jayhawks. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.